I, 31M, met Haley, 31F, in 2022 at a tech industry networking event. Our mutual friend Bob worked with her sister Janet at a marketing firm and thought we hit it off. From the moment we started talking, there was an instant connection. Haley had this warmth about her that made everyone around her feel comfortable. We ended up talking for hours that night, missing most of the event sessions. I've been working as a senior software engineer at a major tech company for the past 6 years. I love my job and earn around $120K annually. After my first marriage ended 5 years ago, I focused heavily on building financial security. My ex-wife and I split amicably. We just grew apart after realizing we wanted different things in life. However, the divorce proceedings opened my eyes to how messy things can get financially, even in an amicable split. My ex initially tried claiming half of my condo even though I bought it before marriage. We eventually resolved it, but the experience taught me valuable lessons about protecting assets. I bought my condo for $650K when the market was down and managed to pay it off completely through smart investments and aggressive saving. I also have a decent investment portfolio and no debt. I'm proud of what I've accomplished but never thought it would become a source of conflict in my relationship. Haley works as an administrative assistant at a local real estate firm while pursuing her part-time business degree. She's incredibly hardworking, balancing work and studies while maintaining our home life. When we first started dating, she was going through some financial difficulties. She told me about a $40K personal loan she took from her uncle years ago to help with some family emergencies. Her uncle never pressured her to repay it, but I could see the debt weighed on her conscience. Early in our relationship, I noticed Haley was struggling with basic expenses. Her old car kept breaking down, and she didn't have health insurance because her employer didn't provide benefits to part-time employees. I offered to add her to my health insurance and let her use my car since I preferred taking the subway to work anyway. It just made sense. Why have her struggle when I could easily help? I also started covering all our household expenses, including rent, utilities, groceries, and maintenance. I wanted her to focus on completing her education without financial stress. Things were going great until we started discussing marriage and buying a bigger house together. Haley mentioned wanting a dedicated study space for her coursework, and I suggested we look for a larger place. She had managed to save $70K from her salary and family gifts, which she offered to contribute to the down payment. I planned to put in $550K from selling my current condo. Given the significant difference in our contributions and my previous experience with divorce, I brought up the idea of getting a prenup. I explained that it would protect both our interests, ensuring her $70K investment would be safeguarded along with any appreciation in the property's value. I thought I was being reasonable and looking out for both our futures. Haley's reaction completely blindsided me. She became extremely upset, saying I was treating our relationship like a business transaction. She accused me of not trusting her and implying our marriage wouldn't last. I tried explaining that it wasn't about trust but about being practical and protecting both our interests. She wouldn't listen and kept saying that real love doesn't need legal agreements. The situation escalated when Haley called her sister Janet in tears. Janet then sent me a long message calling me controlling and manipulative. She accused me of using my financial position to make Haley feel inferior. This really hurt because I've always tried to support Haley without making her feel bad about our income difference. My parents, having witnessed my previous divorce, strongly support my decision. They reminded me how even an amicable split can turn complicated when large assets are involved. But Haley's family sees things differently. They come from a background where financial discussions between couples are considered taboo. Her parents never had any formal agreements between them and viewed my suggestion as an insult to their daughter. Haley's uncle, the one who lent her the $40K, got particularly involved in the situation. He started calling Haley regularly, telling her that signing a prenup would be a mistake. He said it would give me too much control over her future. I found this ironic since he never had Haley sign anything when lending her the money, which is partly why she hasn't felt obligated to repay him. The past week has been tense. Haley barely speaks to me at home and spends most evenings at her sister's place, saying she needs space to think. She stopped wearing the promise ring I gave her for our 1-year anniversary, which feels like a clear message about where this is heading. My friends are split on the issue. Some think I'm being overly cautious and risk ruining a good relationship over money. Others say Haley's reaction is a red flag and that someone who truly loves you would understand wanting to protect assets you built before meeting them. I've worked hard for everything I have. While I love Haley and want to build a future with her, I don't think it's unreasonable to want some legal protection. But seeing how hurt she is makes me question if I'm being too rigid about this. Am I being unreasonable for wanting this prenup? Should I just trust that everything will work out without legal protection? Update 1 first, I want to thank everyone who responded to my original post. Reading through the comments helped me realize I needed to have another conversation with Haley about the prenup, but this time with a different approach. Many suggested working with a mediator who could help us create an agreement that felt fair to both parties. However, what happened next completely changed my perspective on everything. I waited until we both had a free weekend and suggested we sit down to discuss our future calmly. I had even researched some mediators who specialized in prenuptial agreements for couples with different financial backgrounds. I thought showing Haley that I was willing to work with a neutral third party would help her see that I wasn't trying to take advantage of her. The conversation started well. Haley seemed more open to discussing things, which gave me hope. But when I mentioned the mediator, her demeanor suddenly changed. After a long pause, she revealed something that made my stomach drop. She had already been consulting with a lawyer for the past 3 weeks, specifically her uncle's business attorney, without telling me. This lawyer had apparently advised her that she might already have claims to my assets even without marriage. According to him, because we had been living together and I had been providing financial support, she could potentially establish a common law marriage claim in our state. The lawyer suggested that my covering all our living expenses and adding her to my health insurance could be used as evidence of a domestic partnership. When I expressed my shock at her going behind my back to a lawyer, especially one connected to her uncle, Haley broke down crying. Through her tears, she admitted that her uncle had been heavily involved in this decision. He had been meeting with her regularly, convincing her that she needed to protect herself since I was being controlling with a prenup suggestion. She revealed that her uncle had arranged several private meetings with his lawyer, who specializes in common law marriage cases. During these meetings, they had been documenting every financial contribution I'd made to our relationship, from the health insurance to the car usage, from grocery bills to utility payments. They had even calculated a monetary value for the lifestyle expectation I had created for her. The more Haley talked, the more I realized how deeply her uncle had influenced her thinking. She admitted that when I first brought up the prenup, she was hurt but understood my reasoning. However, after talking with her uncle, she began to see it as a sign that I was trying to maintain financial control over her. Her uncle convinced her that my insistence on a prenup was actually a red flag, suggesting I might be financially abusive. What really stunned me was learning about her uncle's involvement with the original $40,000 loan. Haley finally admitted that the loan wasn't exactly as she had described it. Her uncle had convinced her to keep the details vague, knowing it would make her appear more financially vulnerable to me. The loan existed, but it was structured in a way that her uncle could use it as leverage whenever needed. When I pressed for more details about her meetings with the lawyer, Haley revealed something that made everything click. Her uncle had been recording all our conversations about finances for the past month. He had instructed her to try to get me to make verbal commitments about our financial future without a prenup, which could potentially be used in court later. I felt completely betrayed. Not only had Haley been secretly consulting a lawyer, but she had been actively gathering potential evidence to use against me, all while refusing to discuss a fair prenup. The woman I loved and trusted had been recording our private conversations and documenting our relationship like a legal case. Haley tried to justify her actions by saying she felt powerless in our relationship because of the financial inequality. She claimed she was just trying to protect herself the same way I was with the prenup. But there was a massive difference between openly discussing a legal agreement and secretly building a case against someone you claim to love. I asked Haley to give me some space to process everything. She agreed and went to stay with her sister again, but this time the situation felt different. The trust between us had been severely damaged. How could I continue building a future with someone who had been secretly plotting potential legal action against me? My parents, when I told them what happened, were furious. My mom reminded me that she had always found it strange how interested Haley's uncle was in our relationship, often asking detailed questions about my finances at family gatherings. My dad, who works in finance, suggested I consult with a lawyer immediately to protect myself. I'm now staying with a friend while I figure out my next steps. The irony isn't lost on me. My insistence on a prenup to protect both our interests led to discovering that Haley and her uncle had been planning potential legal action all along. It feels like my worst fears about protecting my assets were justified, but not in the way I expected. I'm not sure where this leaves us. Haley keeps texting, saying she's sorry and that she got carried away with her uncle's advice. But how can I trust her again knowing she was capable of such deception? Was the entire relationship built on manipulation from the start? Would I be TA for ending things now, or should I try to understand her perspective and work through this? Update 2. After discovering Haley's secret legal consultations, I suggested we take a break to reevaluate our relationship. She moved most of her things to her sister's place but left her laptop and some documents at my condo, saying she'd pick them up later. I was still processing everything that had happened when I discovered something that made the previous revelation seem minor in comparison. While organizing the home office last weekend, I found Haley's laptop open on the desk. I wasn't planning to look through it, but a document tab caught my eye. It was titled Asset Strategy 2022 to 2024. My heart sank as I began reading. What I found was worse than anything I could have imagined. The document contained detailed plans dating back to several months before we even met. There were email exchanges between Haley, her uncle, and his lawyer discussing their strategy for what they called high-value relationship acquisition. They had identified me as a potential target after Haley's sister Janet learned about my financial status through our mutual friend Bob. The most disturbing part was how meticulously they had planned everything. The seemingly chance meeting at the tech event wasn't chance at all. They had orchestrated the entire thing, using Bob's connection to Janet to ensure Haley would be there. They had even researched my interests beforehand so Haley would know exactly what to talk about. The $40,000 loan story was completely fabricated. There was no debt at all. They created this narrative to make Haley appear financially vulnerable while presenting her uncle as a caring family member who helped her in difficult times. They thought this would make me more likely to offer financial support, which I did exactly as they predicted. Haley's uncle, Robert, turned out to be the mastermind behind everything. Further digging revealed he had done this before. There were documents referring to 2 previous cases where he had helped young women establish relationships with wealthy men, then used legal pressure to extract significant settlements. In both cases, they had used similar tactics, establishing common-law marriage claims based on financial support and shared living arrangements. The documents included a detailed tracker of every penny I'd spent on Haley. They had screenshots of all my bank accounts, which she must have taken while I was sleeping, copies of our text conversations about finances, and even recordings of conversations where I talked about my assets. They had basically built a complete legal case while pretending to be offended by the idea of a prenup. What made me feel physically ill was finding a series of messages between Haley and her uncle discussing their exit strategy. They had planned to wait until we bought the new house together, ensuring Haley's name was on the deed. Then, they would file for common-law marriage recognition and demand a settlement. They estimated they could get at least $400,000 based on their previous successes. I immediately contacted my lawyer and shared all the evidence. She confirmed that Haley and her uncle had already filed preliminary paperwork attempting to establish common-law marriage status in our state. If I hadn't discovered their plan and had bought the house with Haley, I could have lost a significant portion of my assets. When I confronted Haley with the evidence, her response was telling. Instead of denying everything, she tried to justify her actions by saying she had truly fallen for me along the way and had been having doubts about going through with their plan. She claimed her uncle had pressured her to continue, threatening to expose her if she backed out. I learned that Haley and her uncle had used similar schemes before, though never for amounts this large. They typically targeted wealthy divorced men, believing they would be more vulnerable and less likely to notice red flags. My insistence on a prenup had apparently thrown a wrench in their usual strategy. The most painful revelation was finding messages between Haley and Janet from our early dating period, discussing how to manipulate me emotionally. They had analyzed my previous divorce and crafted Haley's personality to be exactly what they thought I was looking for. Every seemingly genuine moment had been calculated. I've shared all the evidence with my lawyer, who is now preparing legal action against Haley, her uncle, and everyone involved in their scheme. The hardest part is accepting that the woman I loved, the relationship I thought was real, was all an elaborate con from the beginning. I've moved to a new condo and am working with a security consultant to ensure my safety and protect my assets. Haley keeps trying to contact me through different numbers, alternating between apologizing and threatening to expose me, though for what, I'm not sure. Her uncle, through his lawyer, has tried to frame everything as a misunderstanding, but the evidence speaks for itself. Now I understand why they were so resistant to a prenup. It would have ruined their entire plan. I suppose I should be thankful that my caution about protecting my assets led to uncovering their scheme before it was too late. Update 3. It's been a challenging 6 months since my last update. A lot has happened, and I wanted to provide a final update to close this chapter of my life. After discovering Haley and her uncle's elaborate scheme, I took immediate legal action. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters to Haley, her uncle Robert, her sister Janet, and their lawyer. I also filed a detailed police report documenting their attempted fraud. The police investigation revealed even more than we initially discovered. Haley and her uncle had successfully pulled this scheme off 3 times before, not just twice as we originally thought. They had targeted wealthy men in different states to avoid detection. In each case, they had manufactured common-law marriage claims to extract settlements. Their previous targets had paid up quietly to avoid public embarrassment. The prosecutors initially showed interest in pursuing criminal charges for fraud and conspiracy. However, they ultimately decided there wasn't enough evidence for a criminal case since nothing had been formally filed in court yet. The previous victims also refused to come forward, having signed NDAs as part of their settlements. I've taken extensive measures to protect myself. I moved to a secure building with 24/7 security, installed a comprehensive camera system, and changed all my passwords and accounts. I even had to switch jobs because Haley knew my entire work routine and would try to engineer random meetings. My company was understanding and let me transfer to our Seattle office. Haley's attempts to contact me have evolved over time. Initially, she sent dozens of emotional messages claiming she had really fallen in love with me and that her uncle had forced her to participate in the scheme. When that didn't work, she switched to threats, saying she would tell everyone I had been abusive, completely false. Most recently, she tried offering to testify against her uncle in exchange for me dropping everything. The most surprising development came when Robert's wife contacted me. She had discovered similar documents about other scams on his computer and was filing for divorce. She provided additional evidence showing that Robert had been running these relationship scams for over a decade, using different family members as bait. Haley wasn't his first accomplice, just his most successful one. Some mutual friends suggested I try to forgive Haley, saying she seemed genuinely remorseful. But discovering the level of calculation that went into deceiving me made forgiveness impossible. Every memory of our relationship is now tainted, knowing that each moment was scripted and planned. Bob, our mutual friend who introduced us, was horrified when he learned how they had used him. He had genuinely thought he was helping 2 friends find happiness. He's been helping me rebuild my trust in people and even introduced me to a great therapist who specializes in helping fraud victims. My lawyers are still building a civil case against Haley and her uncle. We're focusing on documenting the pattern of fraud and attempting to contact their previous victims. While criminal charges might not be possible, we believe we can at least prevent them from targeting others in the future. I've learned valuable lessons from this experience, but I won't let it make me bitter. I'm focusing on healing and rebuilding my life. I've gotten more involved in fraud awareness programs, sharing my story to help others recognize similar scams. The experience has made me more cautious, but I'm determined not to let it destroy my ability to trust completely. For now, I maintain absolute no contact with Haley and her entire family. I've blocked them everywhere and instructed all my friends and family to do the same. Some days are harder than others, but I know I made the right decision in trusting my instincts about the prenup. It might have seemed overly cautious at the time, but it ultimately exposed a scam that could have cost me everything.